Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer!
Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it!
And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Content creators scramble for ideas as they discover Arsenal don't play football today. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter, Yankee Gunner. I was reading the fine print, and I believe it said that if the day ends in Y, Arsenal have to play a football match. But in fact, get this, Arsenal don't play football any of the days of this week. That's right. Not Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, not Thursday nor Friday. Now, I hear the pedants out there saying, but Saturday is a day of the week. Well, you know what? You know what I meant. Week versus weekend. No football. And so, gives us a chance to dig into some other topics today. I am thrilled to announce that Aaron West from CBS Sports, host of La Liga Zone, general all-around great guy, really knowledgeable football person, and someone who creates some of the best football content out there, will be joining us in just a little bit. So you'll want to stay tuned for the entire show this time, as opposed to usual when you're just bored and tired of us. If you stuck it out last time, you heard Dr. Raj provide some really interesting content on injuries and rehabilitation of injuries and managing minutes. And today, you'll be rewarded with Aaron West. So please stick around for that. Paul's on Twitter. Pause my pencil. Pause.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter. Clive PFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello, hello.
Tim's on Twitter. Just about hello, Tim.
Hello there.
And thank you to you people listening, because you are, and I mean this with all due respect, the greatest humans imaginable. Now, I hear you saying there may be greater humans, and I want to be clear, there are not. Do not be fooled. You are the greatest humans imaginable. And we are nearing an announcement of a very, very big event to celebrate next season. But there are details still to be sorted, so I don't want to ruin it yet. But I want to tease you by letting you know that we're on the brink. We're on the brink of a big event announcement. So stay tuned for that. Having done all of that, it is now my pleasure to actually start the football conversation. And I think where we can start this, let's start with a little Burnley preview, and then we're going to get to some young player development issues. We're going to talk Balogun and Nketiah, Nelson, and so on and so forth. But it is Burnley at the weekend. There are midweek games. We don't play one. Burnley did. They got housed, as the expression goes. Or actually, no, I take it back. Burnley got housed by Spurs. See, this is the problem. Trying to remember. They drew with Leicester. Yeah, I know. Trying to remember what happened when. They got housed by Spurs at the weekend and drew with Leicester yesterday. And so, Clive, you know, we owe them one. This is a game that we should be approaching with a great deal of anger and frustration, hopefully, because if you had to go back and say, you know, what is really representative of the sort of nadir of form in our bad run from November and December, you could argue that the home loss to Burnley when Saka was sent off is right up there. And this is a chance to really sort of stick it to them. Now, having said that, Burnley at Turf Moor, not an easy team to play against. But as we saw with Spurs, if you've got the talent up front, you can still hurt them. So for you, a little bit of a revenge factor here and maybe a chance to measure the distance we've come from that really low ebb in December.
Yeah, I always say styles make football, different styles make football, and this is a style I don't like. You know, lots of heavy-legged, lever-footing type players, you know, straight line, 4-4-2. Normally have one big forward and a tearaway. So they have Vidra or what's that guy's name? They have Jay Rodriguez and Ashley Barnes. That's the one. Ashley Barnes.
Do not like him.
Goodness. He is he's unbelievable. He's like Luis Suarez, the English version of just looking for issues to cause issues. And
he's injured this weekend, by the way.
Yeah, I didn't see him on the last team sheet, so I just think, wow, he's a player I don't like. So,
which is weird because like you love Harvey Barnes to the point where you were almost rooting for Leicester against us.
The Harvey Barnes thing. I've made my point. I just wanted to show people what a footballer really was and stop getting your heads up your asses over Ozils and your Guendouzi's, because that's not the way it should be, right? So the game's moved on.
Brothers really bring out the emotions in you. That's all I'm saying.
The game's moved on, and they've got, you know, and to be fair to Burnley, they've got one player that looks quite bright in Dwight McNeil. I know that he's going for the England pathway and he's trained with England and done very well with England, and maybe he's playing for Burnley. If he's playing for a different team, we'd look at him slightly differently. So back to Arsenal. I think, it was a game that shook me to my boots because they didn't even have a shot and they beat us 1-0, if I remember rightly. And that was a moment you thought, okay, this is actually pretty bad. Where are we going? That was the moment for me that sewed me up. Xhaka did his thing, and I thought, okay, it's time to jump off the Xhaka train forever. I'm back on it now. so that changed. This time he's done. I should have gone with Elliot the first time. He's done. I'm not going back. But I'm back on the Xhaka train again because he's playing well. And that's football. It makes a mess with you. But Spurs beat them very well. I'll say well. They did beat them well, but it's transitions they beat them well. I watched a bit of the game, and there was loads of breaks. And I'm not sure if we're quite a transition team, but we are getting sharper going through the pitch and getting quicker. So that'll be interesting. So not a game I look forward to, Elliot. Don't like the team, don't like the club, don't like the management, don't like anything about their culture. Bring it on.
I mean, it's interesting, right? Because you think of them as a tough team to break down, doesn't score a lot, but hard to break down. I mean, you look at the table by XG, and, I know everybody loves XG, so always stay for the XG content. But they are, in terms of the XG they create, they are fourth worst in the league. Third worst in the league, tied with Sheffield. So that gives you an idea. Sheffield United and Burnley both had 24 expected goals. In terms of expected goals against, though, where you think, that's where they're tricky. 17th? 17th in the league? 16th? So it's not a good season for Burnley on the underlying metrics, for what that's worth. And I do think if you look at how they played against the big teams, they've gotten some results, like against Liverpool, but Liverpool had 27 shots in that game, and, Burnley did a Burnley, right? They just blocked everything. I think this is a game where we can put them under a lot of pressure. The question, Tim, is what's the priority? We've had a full week off. The team is going to be rested for the first time in a while, or at least relatively rested compared to everybody they've been playing against, and to be fair, including Burnley, who just played against Leicester. But he may decide he wants him even more rested for Olympiacos. And I don't really have a sense of that. So when it comes to the players who didn't play at the weekend against Leicester, what are you expecting for Aubameyang, for Saka? I imagine, with Smith Rowe out, Pepe's probably back in line, but it could be Willian again. Where do you see Arteta putting his chips?
Yeah, I think Aubameyang and Saka will certainly come back in to the team. I think those are just players. That's rotation rather than a tactical plan based on the attackers that we have. What I'll say on Burnley, though, I do think tentatively this is a really good time to play them. Burnley are, everyone in the Premier League has just been on this massive treadmill of games every 3 days. And this is the line in the sand for Burnley. After this, that stops for them. They've got a week till their next game, international break. Very few of their players are internationals. And then they play basically once a week for the rest of the season. They've got the smallest squad and they've had a lot of injuries. And this is the last game of a really grueling schedule for them. And I think that's shown in most of their games recently. They went down early against Spurs and kind of gave it up. I watched a bit of their game against Leicester. They started really, really well, but they just couldn't sustain it. They got tired and they should have been more than a goal up. They should have pressed home that advantage and they just ran out of legs. So I think we're going to be facing a very, very tired side that's got some injuries, and Ashley Barnes is not going to be fit for this one. They've got a couple who haven't trained yet, who might go in half fit, like Robbie Brady. So they're kind of, this is a good time to get them. I think that after this game, they will probably go on a bit of a run and avoid relegation because they'll be playing once a week again. And they'll get injured players back. So this for me is a good time. A bit like the Leicester game. I think we got Leicester at a good time, and this feels like that. I think the priority should always be the next game, really, in terms of keeping that momentum up. Also, Saka for Saka and Aubameyang, for example, that's a week and a half off. Now they not played since, so yeah, not only not playing last weekend, but the couple of days before that. So they've had 9 days off effectively, and I think that would very much be with a view to we're playing you for the next 4 games. So Burnley, both legs of Olympiacos, and the North London derby. I think the rotation will be more maybe at the back. And maybe someone like Thomas Partey is someone we have to handle with kid gloves, and then around that we can make rotations and things like that. We can play Martinelli perhaps in this game, or play Pepe in one of them, or play Willian in one of them. Like, we can rotate one. Let's say Aubameyang and Saka are in line to start all of the next 4 games, then that leaves another spot open to rotation, and that can easily rotate between Willian, Pepe and Martinelli. We can decide what we want to do with Thomas Partey. We can rotate Cedric and Bellerin. Like, I really honestly think in the Arsenal team now, it's really only Tierney, Xhaka, Saka and Aubameyang who are like, and Leno obviously, who are like the absolute, these guys are gonna play if they're fit. And the rest I think is really open to a bit of rotation, and they might even rotate Xhaka for this one. They might even say, well, they wound you up last time, they'll try and do it again. Partey's fit, Ceballos is fit, why don't we sit you down for this one? So that might be, I think, the only bit of prioritization he'd do in the rotation. Other than that, I just don't see him seeing it as anything other than it's a game, let's win it.
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult in a sense because Olympiacos on Thursday is a huge game away, but then it's the derby at the weekend and then it's Olympiacos again. And so he's going to want his absolute most important, most valuable players for those 3 games, I would think, unless we do something spectacular like win 4-0 away at Olympiacos, which I would take, in which case the subsequent Thursday, he might get a respite. But it begs a question, Paul. I mean, will he try to do what he did last weekend and say, I use the guys that are sort of second choice in a lot of positions? They rewarded me with a good performance. They had the energy. I mean, Burnley played on Wednesday and have the first game on Saturday. So you're going to face a weakened, tired Burnley team. Maybe a fresh backup selection of Arsenal players is still more than enough for them. And I mean, you're still talking about players of the caliber of Martinelli and Lacazette and Pepe, who, is sort of first choice stroke second choice. And maybe a Ceballos comes back in, who's no slouch. If it's Cedric and Tierney, that's a choice that he could make, or he could go Bellerin and Cedric and give Tierney rest. These aren't bad players you're picking from. I just think it's sort of at a tipping point, because if he plays the first choice against Burnley, the very absolute first choice, and plays them Thursday at Olympiacos, then you do sort of run into the situation of maybe not quite being as fresh for the derby as you'd like. So am I overthinking this one a little bit, or do you think it's going to be another mixed lineup?
So, I mean, I think he has a tough choice. And I think, to be honest, I think we're all seriously underestimating Burnley. Burnley's chief weapons are fear and surprise and ruthless efficiency.
There are 3 chief weapons. We're doing a Spanish Inquisition joke here.
Yes, I'm getting to it. Okay. Amongst their chief weapons are fear, surprise, ruthless efficiency, and a fanatical devotion to Nick Pope. Any good?
I see what you did. There. If you want to look up the Spanish Inquisition skit from Monty Python, the actual line is a fanatical devotion to the Pope.
Yeah.
But to Nick Pope. I like it.
It broke out in our conversation during the week, you and me and Giant Gooner. So
and you executed it really well on Twitter, and I sort of stepped on your toes and prevented the perfect execution here. I should say, by the way, happy birthday to Bern Leno, celebrating his birthday today. Oh. So, yeah, I mean, setting aside Burnley, I can't explain it for the record, but there's something about Burnley where they've kind of become the Stoke for me in the current Premier League.
Yeah.
And so I have a terrible distaste for them. I'd really like to see us hammer them. I also think, though, to some extent, there may be an argument that some of the quote-unquote second-string type players match up a little better against Burnley in some respects. I mean, do you think that there's an argument for that?
Yeah, I mean, they get their goals from aerial presence. So maybe Pablo Mari sticks around for this one. Wouldn't hurt. I mean, Gabriel's pretty decent too in the air, but Pablo Mari might be a good matchup in this, and he's mobile. I mean, I was looking statistically at Burnley to see if they do anything particularly interesting that stands out. They top the league per 90 in offsides. So, I mean, they do use the 2 front guys, Chris Wood and whoever they partner him up with. You know, they work hard, they run around. They don't score many goals, but it's all knockdowns, knock it out to the the wide midfielder running forward who's going to bang in crosses. So we've got to keep it tidy at the back, not be giving away stupid free kicks, etc. And limit the number of set pieces, crosses. They're obviously going to go long, but you can see Marie maybe playing. I wonder if Holding might be ready to be back, but the centre back pairing would be key, because you don't want any errors creeping in. Xhaka needs to keep a cool head. I think Xhaka will be played because Arteta and Xhaka won't want to make an issue of this among themselves. I hear Tim's point, but they'll probably use that as the rationale in some ways for why Xhaka should play. And he's just got to keep a cool head, and they all do at the back, and not give them anything easy. They are pretty hard working. They do press on the front lines, but they're just unremarkable. So I don't know that you do anything special or different. They struggle to score a goal or more than one goal. So basically, your tactic has to be to get out there, keep it reasonably controlled at the back, and go and score 2-3 goals where you take it out of their hands, because they just can't create. And what they do create at the moment, they don't score and finish. They're really struggling for anybody to put up any goals. I think Chris Wood did something like 4 goals or something the last time I looked at it, as their top scorer. So they're struggling, and a lot of their goals will come from set pieces, crosses, certainly aerially. So if you can keep it tight at the back and don't make too many errors in midfield to give them chances to launch balls in, then I don't think it really, like any of our options we talked about, make sense. I like Tim's theory as usual that maybe this is a chance to go on a run in terms of getting consistency up front for the next 4 games and everybody's reasonably well rested, but it kind of shouldn't matter too much. Interestingly, Burnley was the last it was 13 days before we introduced, it was December 13th, I think. So it was 13 days before we introduced playing with a 10, and we had Lacazette as a 10 in this game. And it was quite an interesting snapshot in time. The Xhaka thing, Aubameyang headed in the own goal. It was just like, what a miserable fucking time.
Yeah.
And how things have turned around, hopefully.
Yeah. It's an interesting sort of measuring stick for how far we've come. They've scored 19 goals this season. Only Sheffield United have fewer at 16. This is a team we should be able to just put a lot of sustained pressure on them and not worry so much about getting caught. Now, that doesn't mean you can't get caught, but you'd like to think that this is a game to go play with 65% possession and have most of it in their final third and just keep the pressure on them. Clive, the manager, was asked about top 4 this week. And while I think that feels fanciful, certainly top 6 is there. I've started to wrestle with the question of what's possible this season and where we can finish. I think I'm starting to come around to the idea that it is a lot more important for us to finish in the top 6 than I have given it credit for. There are many people listening to this that were never even Arsenal fans in a period where Arsenal didn't have European football. Either weren't alive for it or weren't Arsenal fans yet. And I think it is more important than maybe we appreciate economically, in terms of prestige, in terms of where we sit in just sort of the conversation of European football, for us to have Europa League football at least, if not Champions League. And with another tier below the Europa League developing to prevent you from being able to just completely save yourself games and travel, I don't think we can be capricious about this. I understand the argument that not having Europe allows you to focus on the league, but I think when you have a big squad, not having Europe can also create challenges of disharmony in the sense of players just not getting minutes and not staying sharp and not being in the plan, and suddenly you're not signing new players because you need a smaller squad, and maybe your young players don't have a path to showing that they can play for the first team. So I think there's a lot of challenges that be presented to this club to miss out on European football. So in your view, what is still realistic? And I know you haven't always agreed with me that we need to be in the Europa League. Are you willing to revisit that?
Well, the club might need to be in there. My personal view is I'd like to see us focus on the league next year and getting the Champions League. But it's not about being right, just my personal view, really. But there's another side to this. And maybe being in the Europa League does have a lot of weight from a sporting perspective and Arsenal's badge perspective. I think if Arsenal not to be in Europe for the first time since I don't know when, it's not a good thing for our outward perception. And also when you look at the game is going through obviously a period where everyone's lost 100 million quid, right? So, and football being football and owners being owners, this is a time when the game is going to get reshaped. And for Arsenal to be out of Europe and to be deemed a smaller club at a time when the game could take reshaping, particularly the Champions League contract, I think is up in 2023. So that you want whatever happens in a game, you want to be in a strong position and your coefficient's got to be strong. So there's that side of things. My selfish side, purely from a squad building perspective, and we know there's going to be up to 9 or 10 players potentially either leaving or being retained, or some of those we may not want to be retained, but they may be retained for resale value. You'll lose a lot of players from the squad, and I just feel that it could be a challenge, and I don't think the squad will be big next year. I think it'll be smaller. There could be a challenge for the manager. So my personal view is focus on getting to the top 4. But there's the other side, and Elliot, I think, even though I don't like the Europa League, I think it's probably more important than I give it credit for. And I think the future of the club is more important than what Clive Palmer thinks about and how many games we have, how many Thursdays we have off, etc. I think it's very important we don't fall further behind, not only from a position in Europe point of view, but perception point of view. I think it's key, because when you're looking to get players, you need to be showing them that you're still serious and you're still selling them something. And I asked myself the question the other week, we got a first time manager. What are we selling people at the moment? So, I think it's the key thing, and I think it's important that we're selling them a level of progression. So I see both sides of it, and I'm not sure which one I actually fall on. I actually don't mind up to a point, but I don't think we're in a position in the league that's truly reflective of how good we are and how poor some of the teams are ahead of us. I think that will sort itself out in the next few weeks. I think we'll catch a few. I think a few are lagging. I'm watching these games as you all are. I'm not seeing many of these teams in form. And I feel as though we are. But it's like golf, right? Every time you think you cracked it, you end up in the trees. And every time I get these teams, I start to believe in them, a walls comes along, right? And that's what we've got to be aware of.
And I mean, I think it is difficult. If you're interested, we did our Premier League roundup for patrons yesterday and had a really interesting chat about a few things, but the feature chat was sort of about the football always being on, what that means for viewership, for fans, for the future of football, but also for the teams contesting the games right now. And I think it is hard to evaluate the quality of teams because so much of these games right now feels like it's contested based on freshness, fitness, energy, because of the sheer fixture congestion. And so, not to be redundant, I think we've been handed a break not playing this week, obviously. But I think in terms of us catching other teams, so much of what happens down the stretch is going to be which of these teams can manage the fixtures. And certainly the teams that remain in Europe will struggle, and the teams that remain in domestic cup competitions will struggle a bit with that. The teams with bigger squads should have an edge if they use those squads. And I'd actually argue, as weird as it sounds, while we may not have a first choice squad that's ready to compete for a title or anything, we have a big squad filled with enough talent to rotate. We saw that against Leicester, and that can be a huge edge. Maybe an edge we want to use as recently or as soon as this weekend. Let's move off the league. I agree with you, Clive. It's going to obviously just play out over the rest of the season. We'll see where we finish, but I do think that it's the next couple of weeks when you look at the fixtures that's going to tell us what's possible, because, Spurs, West Ham, Liverpool on the horizon, you get through that. Our run-in is very quote-unquote easy, but we're going to have to be positioned for it to matter. So we're going to have to get some results from some games that are really tricky, and that includes teams that are directly ahead of us. Tim, the manager's been asked about some young players, and he's asked about Balogun, he was asked about Nketiah, and I think this leads into the conversation I want to have for the balance of the pod, because it's a topic that I think is of particular interest right now as we start to build our squad. Was asked about Balogun staying. There's rumors that he wants 40 grand a week. Arteta still feels that there's a chance and that, the player will stay. Asked about Nketiah, he basically said, it's my fault. It's my fault he's not getting minutes. He's a great guy, trains hard, works really well, love working with him. It's my fault not finding him minutes. I do wonder if this was a case where a technical director needs to have a word in the ear of the coach, having tapped him on the shoulder last summer maybe and said, hey, I know you really like working with this kid. He's done a good job. Let's move him on. Let's make a path for the next guy. Let's be mindful of our squad numbers here, because since Europa League group stage has gone, Nketiah has found it hard to get paths to minutes. And now with Aubameyang as a center forward option, he's behind Oba, he's behind Laka, maybe he's behind someone like Martinelli. We see at Manchester City, you can play without a striker altogether. So the question of whether you need a third or fourth choice striker is really becoming more remote. So how do you evaluate the situations with those two in particular, and maybe the question of whether Arteta just let his heart get the better of him in terms of what he's done with Nketiah?
Yeah, I said in January, I absolutely think we should be putting Nketiah up for sale. I think personally there are some misconceptions about January being an awful time for the market. I don't think it is in certain scenarios. So I don't think it is for a club like Arsenal who are looking for a competitive edge. I think sometimes a club like Arsenal is more likely to get the big player in January, Aubameyang, anyone, for example. But when perhaps all the other teams going, oh no, January's crap, we're not looking. That's when you can swoop in.
Let's not forget our Shabin.
Yeah, exactly.
January signings, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Reyes. We've spent some big money in January before because we've nipped in when everyone else going. Before everyone else goes, oh yeah, we'll revisit that in the summer. And a club looking for a competitive edge like Arsenal, I think January is a good time to buy if you can. But I also think it's a great time to sell a striker that you don't want or that you don't need, because that is when teams are desperate for strikers. That is what all of the teams who are in relegation trouble in the Premier League, the first thing they want is a striker, someone to score goals, and that is a brilliant time to sell in my view. Now that's more of a general comment. I don't know for sure that there was lots of money on the table for Nketiah in January. Maybe there wasn't, but I mean Arteta did say publicly he's not for sale, which just baffled me at the time. I just thought, why? We've got loads of attackers, and he's going to have 1 year left on his deal in the summer. And this is where I think a technical director should be stronger. And really, a technical director doesn't have to say to Arteta, no, you must sell him, I don't like him. What you say is you go, okay, you like him. Do you want to give him a new contract? Because that means you can't buy another striker. If you do that, that means that's gone, that position. So, what do you really want? Do you want, if you want to sign him to a new contract, brilliant. We'll get cracking now and we'll do that. No, you don't. Okay, that means that you don't mind selling him. So we're selling him. That's the kind of, and you don't have to give it as like an ultimatum like that. It's just we've got X spaces for strikers. Is this guy taking a space that you want him to take? That's really the decision you should be making. And I was just baffled, like whatever the market reality is, I was just baffled by this idea that we couldn't possibly sell Nketiah in January. I really, really don't get it. The Balogun one, I think is maybe a little bit more complicated. I don't really have any idea. Like I've seen the kind of the 40k a week figure banded around. I don't really have any idea about value anymore. I don't think in football. I don't know if that strikes me. I was
just thinking today, it's like Bitcoin, right? What 40k for Balogun, is that good, bad, terrible? It's like, what's the value?
Yeah, exactly. Like I just don't know what the going rate is for someone who's had like 3 substitute first team appearances, but you think might blow up one day. I've got no idea. So I don't really know whether that's something we should buy on or not, but I suspect it's not about money with Balogun, quite frankly. I think that's about opportunities.
Yeah, it's funny. I saw Scott put it as, imagine if we were buying a 20-year-old Balogun for £5 million and putting him on 20 grand a week. That's the equivalent. And I think thinking of it that way is interesting. Would you take a punt on that player? I mean, look, no one's going to know his talent better than we are. You would hope. We've seen him his whole career. So the club will know if he's worth that, or at least suspect whether or not he's worth that. And I certainly think if Lacazette's not getting a new deal, Paul, then striker does become a bit of a question. We know Aubameyang's going to stay, but he's getting older. Succession planning is important. I think, and I could be wrong, I don't think Nketiah is the future at the position. I saw someone today say, I don't understand the hate. Realizing that saying a player isn't the level we want isn't hating him. You can be an exceptional footballer, one tier down from Arsenal, and that doesn't mean you hate him. I mean, I look at Alex Iwobi, who was very good for us, and moving him on was the right thing. We got a good fee. I don't think he quite had the qualities we needed at the position. It opened a path for someone like Saka to play and some other players. And, all right, if you want to say, but he could have been a great connective player for us, he could have tried that 10 position. Well, we didn't use him like that. He was used as a wide forward who got no goals and assists. So anyway, moral of the story is, Paul, that succession planning becomes important, and selling players doesn't mean you hate them. It just means there's a level you believe you can go above that. So,
sure.
For me, the answer is to move on Nketiah. I think maybe we missed a window to do it, and that now Arteta can say whatever he wants, and I know he really does rate the player. He turned down an available loan for him, wanting to keep him at the club, but I don't see how he gets the minutes. So if we believe that Nketiah is going to move on, and we're not sure what's going to happen with Balogun, I mean, is it kind of sensible in this case to maybe give Balogun a contract slightly richer than you might like, with the idea that with Nketiah and Lacazette both going, and Martinelli maybe kind of being a center forward option, that Balogun can, for next season, get into a path to being an option there as we try to figure out what's going to be the post-Aubameyang future at that position.
So,
at the most important position, you could argue.
Yeah. So there's a lot of moving parts there, though. Will Lacazette actually leave in the summer? We might want to sell him, but he's got a year left on his contract. Will he want to leave? I think we were trying to sell him this summer, just gone, and he's still here. And I think we've noticed a lot of players that we said we were going to sell in the previous summer I know it was COVID and all that stuff, but it does seem like there's more and more of a tendency for players to say, you know what, it's actually pretty comfortable here, and I'm not leaving unless something great comes up. So,
well, that doesn't mean we're going to give him a new deal just because he wants to stay.
No. I'm not saying, but he has a year left, right? So he might see it out. So we might have him next season. So we'd have our two strikers, whether we want them or not, right? We'd have Aubameyang and Lacazette. And that doesn't open up a new spot. It does seem like Arteta likes Eddie. I know lately when he hasn't had a look in close lately, but in the not too distant future, he gets a few minutes here and there, and he was underwhelming, but he was very much doing the Lacazette version of a striker at that point. In the same way we say, I think we generally agreed that Pepe deserved a chance to play with our new structure with the 10s, and suddenly he starts to look good. Eddie hasn't had a chance to play striker like Aubameyang gets to play striker, where he's running off the shoulder, when he's running in behind, where he's using his movement to push into the penalty area, where he's arriving for chances. That which we know is actually Eddie's strength. I think he toiled manfully doing the 9.5 role, the false 9 role, to reasonable levels. He hasn't looked that exciting in recent outings, but last season he looked somewhat useful to us, doing a job but not finishing things off. He's a finisher. And Aubameyang lately has been about running into the channels, getting into positions, arriving, getting on the end of chances. That's what Eddie's strength is.
But can I ask you a question about that, Paul? Don't we run the risk of talking about football in such a way that the only way we can ever dispose of a player is when we can 100%, without a shadow of a reasonable doubt, conclude that we've done everything in our power to review every possible opportunity for them and only then foreclose that they're not good enough. Like, there isn't that kind of certainty. In football, at some point, you have to make a player evaluation and you gotta live with it. You have to live with it. I mean, Alex Iwobi could have been the best number 10 we ever had because he was such a good connector. We never gave him that option. And you know what? It's fine. We now have Smith Rowe. We have Odegaard on loan. Saka's playing great. Like, I guess you're right. Nketiah might
I'm not against that.
Right. He might be better in what you're describing. The true number 9 ahead of a number 10 in the 4-2-3-1. But like, if the evaluation is he's probably not at the level, okay, there's always a 10% chance we're wrong about that. But clubs have to be more decisive. Otherwise, you wind up with situations like what's going on with Reece Nelson, which is like, who the fuck knows what we're doing with that kid? Like, we just haven't done anything. We've made no decision at all.
I'm fully with you. I wouldn't argue against that position, and I suspect Eddie may not be at the level. But to be fair, when we ask why does Arteta, like was it not you just a little while ago saying that Arteta seems to like Eddie?
He adores Eddie. I don't think he has spoken more effusively positively about any player like he has with Eddie Nketiah. There's no doubt about that.
So when I look for the reasons why, maybe it's because he sees that Eddie is actually more of an Aubameyang type striker. And if that's what we move to, we need a backup for Aubameyang, which in a way Lacazette isn't. He's a totally different kind of striker. Maybe that's what he likes about him. Am I saying we shouldn't sell Eddie if we get a good offer? No, hell, unless Arteta really knows something we don't. I mean, I've always been an Eddie fan, and I think he has a great ability for doing exactly what it is we prize Aubameyang for. But what level is he at? We don't really know. We haven't seen him playing in the first team in that role yet. Maybe Arteta absolutely loves what he sees, and that explains it. But I'm all on board with selling Eddie, clearing the space. The interesting thing is Eddie and Balogun, as I think we've talked about before, as I understand it, have the same agent. So they're kind of got the same agent vying for the same spot. And what we should be offering Balogun, I don't think, is a bumper contract. We should be offering him the chance to play, and if he's half the player he thinks he is and has the confidence he thinks that he should have in his ability, that should be enough for him, because Arsenal at the end of the day pays really well and supports its talented young players. He'll get it. Jesus, Willock got 44 appearances last year. If he's as good as he thinks he is and he's a head on his shoulders, Arsenal's job is to sit down with him and not throw all of the money at him. It's to say, look, this is a very reasonable contract. What we will do for you in the summer is, here's our plan. Eddie's going to go out and loan. This spot opens up for you. We think it's your turn in this spot. And maybe the difficulties and the reason Arteta's talking positively in the media, but we're confused about the messages here. Maybe it's Balogun's off and Arteta's putting a good spin on it. But maybe he just can't talk about all these things yet because they're still kind of got to massage Eddie and line things up.
They have the same agent too. So
yeah,
it's tricky.
And they're kind of awkward, but they got to wait till maybe April. Maybe they all see the way this is playing out and we don't know. That's one possible scenario. It's actually, these things are going to fall into place, hopefully, and they're not going to solve it by throwing money at it, which means they got to throw money at a bunch of other people. Maybe Holding is in there.
He's got to make a decision. It's that simple. He cannot loan. If he loans Eddie Nketiah out in this, then we don't know what we're doing. At that point, the club really needs to have a word with itself. Eddie Nketiah will be 22 this summer. You don't loan 22-year-olds out and then bring them back. It just doesn't work that way. At some point, you trust your evaluation, you get a good fee, and you move forward. Clive, you always say it. You don't love any players. There's always more players. When a 19-year-old, 18-year-old Bukayo Saka breaks through, he breaks through. When Smith Rowe comes into the squad against Chelsea in the middle of a terrible season and flashes that talent, he breaks through. When Gabriel Martinelli breaks into the squad as a teenager with no background playing at this level, he breaks through. when you're 22, it doesn't mean your career is never going to happen and you won't find that level. Jamie Vardy is an example of a guy who developed later in his career. There's lots of strikers who have, but ultimately, I don't think loaning out 22-year-olds is the business we want to be in. I mean, do you think the club has a little bit of an issue with decisiveness? I mean, are you concerned at all about how we've handled like Reece Nelson and what we're doing with Nketiah, or do you think it's just simply a case that the squad has been a little imbalanced and we've had a lot of young players right around the fringe of the first team and we're trying to manage that?
Yeah, no, I do think the club's got issue with decisiveness for probably about 8 years now, but
Touché.
It's what it is. Let's take it one by one, right? So Reece Nelson, he should have gone on loan in January, in my opinion. I'm not sure what the story is. Was there a good option for him, or did he say no to a good option? I'm not too sure. I saw him play under 23s, and that flips nicely to Balogun. I saw a couple of games that were on live. I saw the Chelsea one, and it's quite interesting watching that game because Reece Nelson was by far the best player on the pitch. I mean, it was like watching Neymar. It was stupid. It was a joke. He should not be playing at that level. And Balogun looked quite okay at that level. I know people are so quick to judge him, but it's difficult judging youth players. You have to think about the maturity of the player and the maturity of the players he's playing against. It's something that, I've been involved in academy football and watching academy football for many, many years. When you see a player, you have to think about something called bio-banding. Look at their physical age and look at where they are and try to put them in players with players that are physically at the same level as them. And when you see players like Balogun, who's obviously physically advanced, he can destroy the lower level football. Mm-hmm. We get this impression of him. There's some videos out there of Eddie doing under 21s football a couple of years ago, literally running for the team and scoring. When we see him against men, that's not happening. Eddie's last performance, I think, was Southampton in the Cup. Look at the 2 chances he missed in that game. It wasn't about missing chances. It was the decision that he took in that game, and we got beat. And he had the key chances. I don't think he's been seen since. And it was just the rashness, the fact that that's the thing you look for. You look for, can he cope with leading our line? He's a good player, right? He's England 21 record scorer. Again, at his level, youth level, he is a killer, right? So he needs to develop into a man. So you get some people who are 21, 22, but their biological age is like 19 because their maturity is not quite there yet. You get some people like Saliba who looks like a 28-year-old at 18, right? So it's a different type of thing. And physically, he looks different as well. There's a biological age physically and the emotional age. Eddie looks emotionally quite young, not ready to carry the load yet. He should have gone on loan in January. They probably weren't sure about Martinelli's health because he tweaked his knee on that around Christmas time, and they probably held on to him. And I think that's why Arteta said, it's my fault. He probably said, you'll get minutes, and he suddenly realised, logjam, I can't give you minutes. He should be on loan right now, boosting his price or finding an option for himself in the summer. That's what should happen. On Balogun, the contractual type of things, I veer on what Arsenal are trying to do, which is incentivise him, give him a number, and don't forget who his peers are. His peers are Saka, Nelson, Eddie, Willock, maybe Maitland-Niles, but probably he's further ahead of the senior player. You've got Miguel Aziz, who's doing his contract right now. There's a number there that suits him to where the others are and what they've done and what they could do. And that number the club probably knows, and he wants a higher number. If he wants a higher number, then that's a problem for the club because the whole structure and everything we're trying to introduce is going to get smashed. You're going to get smashed for what? For a player that's had 3 games against men? And they're League One players? No one's seen him playing 90 minutes in the Premier League. No one's seen him fatigued against men. No one's seen him in the second half what he looks like. No one's seen him get kicked how he responds. No one's seen him stuck out on the left wing for too long. No one's seen him playing a team when we're down at 10 men. What do you do then? No one's seen him go behind in the game and see how he reacts, can lead the team. But we're ready to anoint him as something. I'm prepared to wait. And I love the player, but you know me, I don't love any players, if that makes sense. And I do that because I need, because I want to see him. Yeah. You can't see him if you love him, right? And I look at this guy and he's smashing the kids. But with men, I think he's got potential. I really do. I'm not just dismissing him. But just wait. Just wait, people. Wait to see what he looks like, because there are other issues which make a player And you could say, well, you're driving the club hard. Sorry, that last thing. You're driving the club hard. And you didn't sign your first contract timely enough, your scholarship contracts. You were held on to the last moment there. You're holding on to the last moment here. There are other things that make a footballer and makes an employer a club. Eddie Nketiah is the example of somebody. Arteta loves how he works. He loves him as an example, as a trainer, as a professional. And that's what makes the player as well as what he does on the pitch. So I hope it works out for both of them. I wouldn't mind seeing him a third striker next year, but it's up in the air and it doesn't feel like it's going to be a smooth transition.
Yeah, and I want to be clear. I am not going to shed a tear if Folarin Balogun does not stay at Arsenal. Not because I don't think he's good. I don't know. What I do know is we have to be decisive about how we manage these young players. I mean, I said Eddie Nketiah is going to be 22 at the end of this season. Joe Willock is going to come back to our club from loan at 22. Ainsley Maitland-Niles is going to come back to our club at 24 years old. I mean, he's the same age as Kieran Tierney. And Kieran Tierney is a true, solid professional. Meanwhile, we can't start games without 19-year-old Bukayo Saka or 20-year-old Emil Smith-Rowe and feel confident. I think you see what the really special talent is. So, Tim, I'll finish with you on this. I mean, when you look at this crop, all of them are talented. Mm-hmm. It's not a question of saying any of them are bad or good. It is a question of determining where the level has to be, being decisive about it, moving players on, not being in perpetual loan mode because you don't determine the future at a position that way. You don't recoup the resources you need to strengthen your team that way. I mean, the Reece Nelson one really sticks in my craw a bit because this is a guy who's a Jadon Sancho comp when he was in Germany, who is now, I honestly couldn't tell you what's going on with him. He's playing at 21 years old in the reserves, and he seems kind of nowhere. So is this summer really the moment of reckoning for a crop of youngsters that no matter what we do with them, will wind up being one of the great crops we've had? I mean, Smith-Rowe is in. Saka is in. Martinelli's not an academy kid, you know what I mean? We will, Nketiah has played for the first team and been valuable for us at times. So has Joe Willock. But is it the summer of reckoning for this crop? Willock, Nelson, Nketiah, Balogun, Saka, Smith-Rowe. I mean, sort of some make it, some don't.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, in a non-pandemic context, it might have been last summer as well. Like, we got Saka and Martinelli signed up last summer. Hugely, really good to get those guys tied down. During the summer, Nketiah had 2 years left on his contract, right? And we decided not to extend. So that kind of already shows you what we're thinking about him and Willock going out on loan. I just don't think. I wrote something today about my theory for why Martinelli's not getting minutes is because he's quite an instinctive player, and Arteta wants like really structured kind of pattern play in attack, and I think he just wants to coach some of the rough edges off Martinelli a little bit. And then you look at someone like Willock, and you just kind of think, well, Willock is also like quite an instinctive, off-ball player. Like, he just, however good he becomes, he just doesn't really fit Arteta's quote-unquote vision, I don't think. And sending him out on loan to Newcastle, by the way, is absolutely fine. That is a good club for him. I think that's a good fit with the way they play football. I think that's a proper build his value loan move. And I think we'll be able to sell him in the summer without too many problems. Even given the situation. So yeah, it will be. And you know what? Great. Like you say, that would be a really, really good crop. Even if it, if it means we sell loads of them for good money and we raise some money to buy better players, brilliant. That is exactly what it's all about. When you look at like Project Youth, how many of those players were unqualified successes? Like Fabregas, Van Persie, Clichy, you have to say. Denilson and Song were first team players, so you have to say they were successes. But what happened with that generation? Like, who did we get paid for? Like, Van Persie and Fabregas went for nowhere near their value. Clichy went for peanuts as well. And then you had guys like Bentner and Denilson who, like, Bentner ran his deal down. We had to pay Denilson off to leave. Song, Song we got.
He went to Barcelona.
Stupid. Yeah, Barcelona.
Where he tried to take a trophy away from a cancer survivor. Look it up.
And like, Yeah, and so we kind of. I say we got away with that one. That's a good sale. I don't think we're going to be selling like Joe Willock, or I don't think Barcelona are going to be buying anyone, quite frankly. But you know what I mean? Like
that'd probably be the price range they could shop in, to be fair.
Yeah.
Do you think that Project Youth was a massive success? Don't forget, we didn't pay much for these guys.
Exactly.
They lifted our club to the sky. They kept us in the Champions League year on year. I know the competition was different at the time, but from a spreadsheet perspective or a balance sheet perspective, we spend very little, bring them in, train them up, keep us in Champions League. 80 million quid, thank you very much.
Yeah, it was the following period that screwed us, not that one.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, frittering the money away when we had it. So yeah, absolutely. And what we must do now is, we've given Saka the contract, great. We've given Martinelli the contract, great. I hope we're talking to Smith Rowe about giving him a better contract, and then the others just say, okay, thank you. You've got us through a couple of years. You've got us through some cup games where we've not had to use, Nketiah. Thank you. We haven't had to use Aubameyang in the Europa League or the early rounds of the Carabao Cup. Cheers. And then make room for the next crop. Make room for the Ben Cottrell or Aziz or whoever else is there waiting to come through, or Joel Lopez, the left back. This is what it's all about. That is successful. That is a successful use of your academy players. Use them to regenerate funds, and I just hope that Edu, don't get me wrong, I don't think when the summer comes Arteta will be that reluctant to get rid of someone like Willock or Nketiah, certainly not Nelson. So perhaps I'm being a bit harsh on him, but I do hope Edu kind of says, look, this is where we raise the money to get you the player, and Maitland-Niles, potentially this is where we raise the money to get you the players that you really want, and then we'll bring in the next crop and see if there are any Sakas or Smith Rowes in there.
Yeah, and look, the one thing I will acknowledge is these players are cheap relative to other players in terms of what we're paying them in wages, and so
Eddie Nketiah is a lot cheaper than Lucas Perez, put it that way.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah, a lot. I think he makes like £800,000 a year. I don't even know if he makes $1 million a year. Like the fact of the matter is, the club may have looked and said resources are really tight. These academy players are good enough, and for the time being, we can kick the can down the road, keep them, and the wage bill stays manageable. I don't know. I mean, maybe it was a plan. It doesn't look like a plan the way it's gone, but maybe. I mean, you look at Alex Iwobi, right? A very good, perfectly fine player. As compared to attacking midfielders, stroke wingers, dribbles completed 85th percentile, progressive carries 81st percentile, progressive passes 74th percentile, but expected goals 1 percentile, expected assists 26th percentile. He's the player we thought, and we sold him, and we got good money, and we moved on. And I just think
great on Instagram.
Yeah. Well, and how do you replace that? I think it is the point that Clive says he doesn't love any players. They're all replaceable to some extent, but if a young player isn't really showcasing that precocious talent, at what level do you have to say, sure, we could get burned, they could blow up, they could be something incredible, but we're going to be decisive, and sometimes that burns you. I fully acknowledge it, but more often than not, being decisive is the right way to go one way or the other. I want to leave it there because we have Aaron West coming up next, and I'm really excited for that chat as opposed to this one, obviously. So let me say goodbye to Paul. He's on Twitter at PosMonPants. Thanks, Pos.
Woohoo!
Clive's on Twitter at ClivePFC. Thanks, Clive.
Thank you very much.
Tim's on Twitter at Roberta. Thanks, Tim.
My pleasure as always.
Yeah, we'll have a pod tomorrow with Scott for patrons, his sort of analytics pod going over everything, and I'm sure the odds of where Arsenal can finish in the table will prominently feature in that. So if you want to have a sobering reminder of the challenge ahead, you can listen to that. I'm sure Clive will swerve it. We'll take a break. We'll tell you about some interesting stuff. And then after the break, Aaron West from CBS Sports is coming up. Stay with us. Hey everyone, before we get started, I want to tell you about Blue Wire Hustle, a brand new program where you can host your very own podcast here at Blue Wire. Hustle was created to give everyone the opportunity to take your podcast to the next level. Or, if you want to host a podcast and just don't know where to start, Hustle is the perfect place for you. As part of the program, you'll receive personal cover art, Q&As with Blue Wire's top podcasters, access to our community Discord, and an e-learning course full of tips and tricks. And on top of that, we'll help you get your show pushed out to Apple, Spotify, Google, Stitcher, and all other listening platforms. And the best part is, you can get all of this for only $15 a month. That's the same rate as any other hosting site would charge you just for the initial setup. So whether you're starting from scratch or have an existing show that you want to grow, Hustle is an open door to leveling up your sports podcasting experience. Acceptance into the program is limited, so get your application in today. To To apply, go to bwhustle.com/join. bwhustle.com/join. Check out the description box for this episode to find out more, but that's bwhustle.com/join. All right, and now I'm delighted to speak to Aaron West. He covers the Champions League for CBS. He hosts La Liga Zone and does a lot of great content that you're going to want to be able to follow and track down. You can start by doing that on Twitter at Oeste. Did I say that right?
Oeste. Yeah, you were close enough.
Okay, Oeste. I spoke French in school, not Spanish, so I apologize for wasting my time on that. Not bad as an Arsenal fan, to be fair, having a little bit of the French in your locker. But you are an Arsenal fan, Aaron. I mean, how did that befall you?
When I was 12 years old, like I grew up, my parents were not soccer people. We were introduced to soccer by my mom's best friend. And I was introduced to soccer by like Ajax highlight tapes and things like that. So like Ajax highlight tapes and like reading about soccer. Mm-hmm. When I was 12 years old, it was like 98. I just watched the World Cup and I was like, I need to pick a team. I was like serious about football. I was like, I want to be a pro. I like need to pick a team to follow and like really be serious about it. So the first team I picked was Juventus because I'd like watched them. I watched like a highlight tape of them beating Ajax in the Champions League final. I like loved the uniforms. I like researched the club. I saw Edgar Davids. I was like, okay, that's gonna be my team. And then like it kept going, and I could like have like a second team, I think. And Thierry Henry had just left Juventus for Arsenal. I loved Henry, even like the little bit I had seen of him. I loved what Arsene Wenger was doing over at Arsenal. I loved the black players there. I was like super into the black players and like role models I could see myself in at the time. And I like at Arsenal, of course, it's like black player heaven. I looked at Arsenal. I was like, all right, that's my second team. That's gonna be my team. And so literally like 12, 13 years old, I picked up Arsenal, and I had a lot of good years, and now I've had the pain.
Yeah, I think we're all sort of in that position where a lot of American fans in particular came to Arsenal at a really good time and didn't know what we were signing up for ahead of time. But love is love. So now we're stuck. We'll get to some of the stuff you've done in terms of interviewing footballers and things like that in just a little bit. One thing that I think is really a hot topic right now at Arsenal are the young players. That's really the excitement of the season. There's still a lot to play for. There's the Europa League. There might be a top 6 or even a top 4 finish. I'm not so sure about the latter. But really, I think when people look back on this moment, they're going to be thinking about, in particular, Smith Rowe certainly, and Martinelli maybe, but in particular, Bukayo Saka. So, I mean, it seems like such a layup to just say, how impressed have you been with Bukayo Saka? But are you surprised by the extent to which he's sort of shot up? I think of some of these other players, whether it's Jadon Sancho or Phil Foden, there was a little more, I think, build up to their hype before they reached some of the level they're at, whereas Saka went from being kind of impressive to now just exploding onto the scene. So how do you think about his development generally?
I'm surprised, to be honest. Like you could see his talent when he broke through, and you could see, holy shit, this kid has a high ceiling. His highs are going to be high. But I think the thing that surprised me the most is that his lows are not low. When you get young players, that's the thing is like, sometimes they're going to be incredible. Sometimes they're going to be awful because they're teenagers. With Saka, the thing I've most been impressed by is like in the biggest moments, he has been the one to step up. And even when the team's not playing well, or even if he's not I would say playing particularly well, he never drops off a lot where it's like, he needs to be subbed. He's a liability. His head's out of it. I would say the consistency in performance from him has been the biggest surprise, where it's like this kid plays like a prime professional. When he's needed, he steps it up. And when he's not that great, he's still like, okay, we can rely on him, which is like, that's crazy to say about like an 18-year-old, like whatever he is, 18, 19.
And I think it speaks volumes for the fact that Arteta literally couldn't find any rest for him. I mean, obviously he finally sat him down for the Leicester game. And I think surprisingly, the team managed a result there, maybe showing the importance of freshness in a season with such a congested fixture schedule. But in terms of Saka's place among the emerging young talents in the game, I mentioned Foden, I mentioned Sancho, certainly in the England team, that's kind of the triumvirate I think that you're going to hear about. Do you have a sense, as someone who watches all the leagues and really takes in football globally, where he sits in that pyramid of emerging young stars?
Yeah, I would say he's very high up there. When you talk about talent, obviously Kylian Mbappe is the number one. Like, it's far and away. Phil Foden's really emerged this year as a very, very, very talented young player. But I watched Bukayo Saka, and I see a kid who is very, very mature, and he has like that. It's a maturity. It's okay. My mom. I'm from the South. My mom when she sees like a mature little kid, she's like, oh, he's been here before. There's like that kind of like, oh, they understand what's going on. They're like ready for this already, and I see that in him. For sure. Yeah, I would put him in probably the top 5 young talent under 20 right now.
Yeah.
Don't put me on the spot and ask me to give me a full list, but I would say for sure top 10 at least. He's got something special, and like I try to be unbiased relatively as an Arsenal fan. Like, you'll see my tweets when we're bad. I will tell you we're bad. But yeah, he has something that's really, really different, I think, and I'm really excited to watch him grow. And I try not to get too excited about kids because there's so much that can happen in anyone's life just outside of football, and then you step on a football pitch and anything can happen. So I'm just really excited to see his development, and I do have really high hopes for him.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. You can look at a player like Jack Wilshere, whose body didn't hold up enough for him to maybe have the career we might have thought. And then you can look at a player like Samir Nasri, whose personality, for lack of a better way to put it, his life choices maybe didn't allow him to have the career he might have. So yeah, always hard to predict that trajectory, although Saka seems to have a great head on his shoulders. I mean, do you think it's fair to say, injury notwithstanding, that between Smith Rowe, Martinelli, and Bukayo Saka, Arsenal have the rarest of trios in terms of players who may be of a similar caliber at the same time in their career, all coming through together? I mean, it's hard to project that all three will reach that same level, but they certainly all seem to be in that plane of talent. Or do you think that's overstating it with a couple of them?
No, I think I do think Saka is a bit ahead of them in terms of what his ceiling is. I think Martinelli is going to be a very, very special player. I think Smith Rowe also has a very high ceiling, but like Saka to me kind of seems like he has like a little bit of that it factor that like could propel him to being like world class, where I think Rowe and Martinelli will be like very, very good players. But Saka, like, to me, has that something that could propel him to being legitimately like, oh damn, this kid's one of the best in the world for real. But yeah, you don't often get that in youth development, and when you get that number of players coming through, like with Man City, it was Foden really breaking through. He was the one that they started putting on the bench young. He's actually not that young, so now he doesn't count. No, it was Foden for them. For Chelsea, it was probably Mason Mount. You don't often, like, I'm not going to say, please don't quote me as saying this is the same echelon, but like when Xavi and Iniesta came through together, like that was Xavi, Iniesta, and Busquets kind of all came together at the same time. Really, Busquets is a little bit younger, but like that was a really rare period where it's like these kids all came through at the academy at the same time and then just emerged into the first team. That's something that, again, please don't put them in the same category, because some of those players, and I think our Arsenal boys can be very damn good, but I'm not going to put them in the same breath. But yeah, it's something like really cool to see three guys come through the academy and emerge into the first team right around the same time. Like it's special. Like that's something that carries through. That's something that forms a locker room connection that like can build, especially if they can get a couple trophies under their belt together. That's something that builds legacies at a club.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that I would have said they're Xavi, Iniesta, and Messi personally, but you said it. It's out there, and you're committed to it, so it's fine. I have no problem with that at all. Maybe there's more of a United class of '92 quality. I know, now look, Martinelli is not an academy guy, but players that come through at the same time, come of age at the same time, that all want to achieve something together, and it's easy to forget. Also, Rob Holding sort of arrived at a young age. William Saliba, we don't know what'll happen with him, but a young player that may have a future at Arsenal, fingers crossed. And Gabriel's not that old. Tierney only 23. So I tend to be a little bearish on Arsenal's transfer business and squad building. But, hey, if you strike it rich with three teenagers coming good all at the same time, that's a great way to shortcut the project, which leads me to the Arteta question. It's been the weirdest season, Aaron. I can't remember a coach getting as close to feeling like it had to end and turning it around. And that Chelsea game, it felt to me, like we get turned over by Chelsea here. We got 12 goals through 13 games. We're in the relegation zone. Like, does it have to end? And instead he throws in Martinelli and he throws in Smith Rowe and he goes to the back four and we win that game and the trajectory's just taken off from there. I mean, have you been won over by it? Do you still have concerns based on how the season started? And I mean, do you think it's fair to say, I can't think of one, maybe you could think of a situation where it got that close to the abyss and seems to have really aggressively moved away from it?
I cannot recall any manager like really kind of pulling it back from that point. Maybe Ole. I would say Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is probably the only one who's like really where everyone's been Ole out, and then kind of turned it around and they're like, all right, maybe he can stay. But it was really before that match, I was on board with I wasn't like, get him out of here, but if the board had made the decision to get him out of there, I wouldn't have been upset and I wouldn't have said it was a bad decision. And now it's like, I'm not fully won over. I'm not like 100%. This is the manager for our next 5 years, but I do have a lot of glimmers of hope. I believe before the kind of plummet in form, I saw the bare bones of what I thought was a good project. And I think I made a video about this for CBS. I saw the bare bones of what I thought was going to be a very strong project, and I still do. The way that the organization is so much better. The organization in defensive stages, the organization in build-up play. And I think I am very happy with the progress that we've seen so far. My issues are often with team selection with Arteta. And I'm not sure if that will change, or some managers, even if you give them better players, they still make baffling decisions.
You can just say Willian. We're all friends here. You can just say Willian by name, man. We're all friends.
Willian's one of those. David Luiz persisting is one of those. But just in general, like the big question mark hanging over Arteta for me is, if you give him better players, will he pick the right ones? But otherwise, I'm like pleasantly surprised that he has turned it around. And when I say turned it around, what are we still 10th? It's not like we're pushing Champions League places or pushing for the title. We're struggling still as a club where Arsenal should be. But I do see signs of positivity, which is not something I'd expect to say before that Chelsea match.
Yeah, and I mean, look, I can be opinionated. I don't think there's any secrets there. I had personally gotten to that abyss, I think, right before the Chelsea game, and I find myself now really being won over by the job he's doing coaching. I think my question is, did the club maybe extend him too much responsibility too early in his career, in the sense that he's working with a relatively inexperienced director of football in Edu? Arteta's in his first job, and now he's manager, and he has all of these responsibilities that extend beyond just the coaching work that he has to do. And I worry that the strain of all of those responsibilities, you can have great ideas about football and be great at communicating them, and as a young coach, really develop. But can you also know how to operate in the market? Can you also know how to manage contracts? Can you also know how to, manage a squad of different personalities and egos? I wonder if maybe the club, Aaron, through a lack of real oversight at the most executive levels, have given Arteta so much responsibility that it sets him up almost to fail in some ways, because it's a lot for a first-time coach to then have those other responsibilities layered on him.
Yeah, I think there are 100% still questions about the executive decisions that are being made and who has final say, who has the bulk of the decisions, who is directing the overall strategy and what that overall strategy is. So this summer will be massive in terms of, I do think, I will say this January or whatever the winter transfer window came through was very, very productive in terms of getting some of the wages off our books.
Yeah.
In terms of kind of trimming the squad down and like setting the stage for what comes next. So that gives me hope. So from that perspective, I do think I'm like mildly optimistic. I would say.
Mildly optimistic. I'll take that. That's better than where we were not too long ago. And yeah, I mean, the interesting thing, you talk about Arteta picking the right team. He definitely seems to feel safest and most comfortable when he's got some senior leadership in there. He likes picking Luiz. He likes picking Xhaka. He likes to have a Willian on the pitch or a Lacazette or an Aubameyang. And I can understand how a young manager would want players that are more experienced, older, that can communicate his ideas. But if you look at the squad and where its strength is and where it's going, maybe with the exception of Thomas Partey, a lot of it is built into younger players, central defenders who are younger, attacking players who are younger, and he's going to have to trust them, I think, to really explore the ceiling of where the team can go. Before I let you go, I want to get to just some fun stuff that you've done personally, because you've had the chance to interview some incredible footballers. It's one of the, I would imagine, the most fun parts of what you do. I saw you interviewed Robert Lewandowski recently, and saw the video of you guys fixing your hair and getting all set up and ready to go. One thing I really admire about the way the interviews you do seem to work out is it feels like you're able to really pull out the personality of the players and connect with them and humanize them, and then get more interesting responses instead of some of the sort of typical boilerplate that you get in a lot of these player interviews. So do you have sort of a mindset you go into before talking to these players, and how do you calm yourself, because these are obviously huge global superstars of the game, and it must be somewhat intimidating at times to know that you're going to sit down and speak with them, or at least during the pandemic, sit down across from a video platform and speak with them?
Yeah, I'm just in general extremely interested in people and like what makes them tick. So it doesn't really matter who the person is. And most of the time, if I'm interviewing someone, I know a lot about them already. So I know a bit about their personality. I've seen interviews with them. I know how they react to certain things. But I've always been naturally pretty good with people and just naturally kind of calm with people. My personality, like I don't really, I'm pretty laid back overall. So I wouldn't say it's anything I do in general, but just having been an athlete and just having been around. My dad was an elite athlete. He was a coach. He was the first black coach at ACC at UNC Chapel Hill. And so I grew up around athletics and just understanding what makes elite athletes tick. So it's kind of cool for me just to talk to each of these guys and kind of parse out what it is that makes them different, but also just so similar. Like we're all athletes, like we're all pretty competitive. And in general, most of these guys are pretty good people too. So I think that's a side that a lot of fans don't really think about, is like they're actually just people. Like they have families, they like to hang out on their own. They don't just play football. They just happen to be really good at football. They're people. So that's the fun part for me, is just picking out what like makes them unique as a person.
Yeah, just people with their multicolored Lamborghinis. That's just people. I think that's a great thing to remember. And yeah, and maybe a good thing to remember when it comes to engaging on social media and things like that. They are people. Is there one though that maybe you couldn't get the heart to stop racing, that you struggled to get yourself calm?
I wouldn't say in particular it was because of the person. The Angel Di Maria interview I did, PSG, made me nervous because I did it in Spanish. Oh wow! And so I just it's obviously not my first language, and I speak Spanish decently, but like you get put on camera and you're speaking Spanish live, I was like, my heart was racing before that one. But yeah, in terms of just people overall, there's like a list of people that's like maybe 5 long that would make me like freak out like that. It's like Ronaldinho, original Ronaldo, I think Zidane. Honestly, beyond that, I don't know how many more would really make me freak out.
Yeah, I mean, I could put a list together for myself. It'd be a lot longer than that. But I also, my approach is a little different. You're likable and you get to people to like you. I try to be off-putting and difficult to connect with as a human being. So that strategy hasn't worked as effectively for me. I know you have a hard stop, and I definitely don't want you to think of me as a guy that kept you over, because we'd love to have you on again in the future. But people can look for you during Champions League coverage at CBS, La Liga Zone. Anything else that we should be on the lookout for, or just generally keep an eye out?
Just generally keep an eye out. Yeah, if it's happening, you'll see it on my Twitter.
Awesome. Yeah, and I would have chatted with you about FIFA, because I know you're big into FIFA, but I'll admit, Aaron, I don't understand 90% of the stuff you're talking about there with the cards and the players. But
we'll save that for part 2. We'll have to do another one soon.
I need an education on that. Thanks, Aaron. You can find Aaron on Twitter at Oeste.
Yes, that's the one. You finally got it.
All right, and just all those other places. Thanks so much, Aaron.
Yeah, thank you, man. Have a good one.
Yeah, you bet. All right, my name's Elliot Smith. You can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. We'll have more for you coming up. But in the meantime, we love you, and we'll talk to you after Arsenal 10, Burnley 0.